Shalom, my name is Todd Bennett, and we're currently in the midst of the Omer count. And a story that always comes to mind during this period of time is the Book of Ruth, because Ruth literally takes place within the time frame of the barley harvest and Shavuot, the first fruits of the wheat harvest. So I think there's important lessons that we can learn from this incredible story. It's one of my favorites, and so I thought I would just read through it and just have it as an audio version for you, maybe make some comments along the way, just to see what we can glean from this wonderful story about gleaning, as a matter of fact. So we'll start at Ruth 1:1. It says, "Now it came to pass in the days when the judges ruled that there was a famine in the land, and a certain man of Bethlehem, Judah, went to dwell in the country of Moab, he and his wife and his 2 sons. The name of the man was Elimelech. Elimelech is actually Hebrew words Eli Melech. El is my king, or my king is El. The name of his wife was Naomi, and the names of his 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion, Ephrathites of Bethlehem, Judah. And they went to the country of Moab and remained there." So the question is, well, why would they go to Moab, which was a pagan country nearby, essentially, even though related through Lot, essentially enemies of Israel. And this was in the time of the judges, so that means that likely the tabernacle was at Shiloh. And why would you leave the covenant land when Yah has his house, his tent is constructed in the land, and you're supposed to be dwelling in the land and bringing him your first fruits and worshiping him at his feast? Why would you leave? That's the first big glaring question that we would have to ask ourselves. And we find out a reason why a little bit later in the text. It says, "Then Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and she was left and her 2 sons. Now they took wives of the women of Moab. The name of one was Orpah, and the name of the other Ruth. And they dwelt there about 10 years. Then both Mahlon and Chilion also died. So the women survived her 2 sons and her husband." So here we are, we've got a situation where all the men in this household died. So Elimelech basically has no heirs at this point. And it would seem to me that they were under a curse for leaving the land. And I think that makes sense, as we'll read further on. Well, anyways, Naomi rose with her daughters-in-law that she might return from the country of Moab, for she had heard in the country of Moab that Yah had visited his people by giving them bread. Therefore she went out from the place where she was, and her 2 daughters-in-law with her. And they went on the way to return to the land of Judah. Now that's interesting that so they started the journey, and she heard in the country of Moab that Yah was back. So we understand that they'd left most likely because there was a famine in the land. And whenever there's a famine in the land, that's because Yah is trying to get people's attention. Hey, there's a problem. You're not serving me properly. You're not obeying me properly. So I'm going to withhold, the rains from the heaven and the bread and such to wake you up so that you realize we've got an issue here that we've got to resolve. Well, instead of possibly repenting and turning towards Yah, it appears that Naomi's husband just took them somewhere else to get away from the famine. And so anyways, they're all dead. Naomi decides she's going to return, and she said to her daughters-in-law, "Go, return each to her mother's house. Yah deal kindly with you, as you've dealt with the dead and with me. Yah grant that you may find rest, each in the house of her husband." So in other words, she's saying, look, don't go with me. Go, move on. You're freed from your husband, so go find yourself a husband and dwell in your land. So she kissed them, and they lifted up their voices and wept. And they said to her, surely we will return with you to your people. Now they both said that. But Naomi said, turn back, my daughters. Why will you go with me? Are there still sons in my womb, that they may be your husbands? Turn back, my daughters, go. For I'm too old to have a husband. If I should say I have hope, if I should have a husband tonight and should also bear sons, would you wait for them till they were grown? Would you restrain yourselves from having husbands? No, my daughters, for it grieves me very much for your sakes, that the hand of Yah has gone out against me. So Naomi is really taking some blame upon herself and saying, look, I've brought this on, so don't follow me any longer. Go and have husbands and have families. And then they lifted up their voices and wept again. And Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth clung to her. And she said, look, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and to her gods. Return after your sister-in-law. So notice that now. It's not just to go have a husband of her own and a family of her own, but it's also returning to her own gods, the pagan gods of the Moabites, which were pretty severe. But Ruth said, entreat me not to leave you, or to turn back from following after you. For wherever you go, I will go, and wherever you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your Elohim my Elohim. Where you die, I will die, and there will I be buried. Yah, do so to me, and more also, if anything but death parts you and me. When she saw that she had determined to go with her, she stopped speaking to her. Now the two of them went until they came to Bethlehem. And it happened when they'd come to Bethlehem that all the city was excited because of them. And the women said, is this Naomi? But she said to them, do not call me Naomi, call me Mara. For the Almighty has dealt very bitterly with me. I went out full, and Yah has brought me home again empty. Why do you call me Naomi, since Yah has testified against me, and the Almighty has afflicted me? So the words that she uses are very interesting here, because she says, call me Mara. Now, anybody that just celebrated the Passover understands that you have bitter herbs during the Passover meal. And then after Israel crossed the Red Sea, one of the first places they went was Marah, where there was bitter water. So these, and of course she says, that the Almighty has afflicted me, and she's referring to affliction and bitterness and all that. And of course that should bring us back to the Passover in that time of the Exodus from Egypt. And as a matter of fact, this is like an Exodus for Naomi, where she was in the land of Moab, in a foreign land, and so she's returning. She had to cross over. Moab is to the east of the land, and so she would have crossed over from east to west, just like Israel crossed over from the plains of Moab when Joshua led them across. Possibly at the same location where they crossed, possibly at the same location where Yeshua was later immersed. So we'll carry on at Ruth 1:22 now. So Naomi returned, and Ruth the Moabitess, her daughter-in-law, with her, who returned from the country of Moab. Now they came back to Bethlehem at the beginning of the barley harvest. Okay, so there we are again. It gets us to that time of in the counting of the Omer. We know that the Omer count begins, the scriptures say, on the morrow after the Sabbath, which means the first high Sabbath is the Feast of Unleavened Bread. The day after that is day 16 of month 1, when the priest would cut the first Omer, the first fruits, the first sheaf, a wave sheaf offering would be made, and that would initiate the barley harvest. So here they are. They came to Bethlehem at the beginning of the barley harvest, which puts us right at the beginning of the Omer count, right after the Passover. And we've got all these themes going on right there. It says there was a relative of Naomi's husband, a man of great wealth of the family of Elimelech. His name was Boaz. So Ruth the Moabitess said to Naomi, please let me go to the field and glean heads of grain after him in whose sight I may find favor. And she said to her, go, my daughter. Then she left and went and gleaned in the field after the reapers. And she happened to come to the part of the field belonging to Boaz, who was of the family of Elimelech. So we've got this relationship here that we see is established. We've got Boaz, again, is a man of great wealth, which means even if there was a famine that had gone on, he fared well in the famine because he stayed in the land and was faithful to Yah. So there's a lesson to be learned there, that we don't try to outrun Yah or escape his judgment, but we need to face it head on and turn to him and return to him, and he will provide for us through difficult times. All right, and it says, Ruth 2:4, now behold, Boaz came from Bethlehem and said to the reapers, Yah be with you. And they answered to him, Yah bless you. Then Boaz said to his servant who was in charge of the reapers, whose young woman is this? So the servant who was in charge of the reapers answered and said, it is the young Moabite woman who came back with Naomi from the country of Moab. And she said, please let me glean and gather after the reapers among the sheaves. So she came and has continued from morning until now, though she rested a little in the house. And it's interesting, of course, the whole concept of reapers, the fact that, or gleaners, gleaners come after the reapers. So Boaz obviously had his people who were reaping and harvesting his crops, but they're commanded not to completely, thoroughly, harvest everything. They're supposed to leave anything that falls to the ground. They're supposed to leave it for the poor. And of course, it's an important lesson there that the poor would receive, this charity, so to speak, but they had to work for it. They had to go out in the fields and they had to glean. And so that's what Ruth was doing. Her and Naomi were poor, and so she was gleaning, which is a wonderful provision that Yah has for the poor. Well, then Boaz said to Ruth, you will listen, my daughter, will you not? Do not go to glean in another field, nor go from here, but stay close by my young women. Let your eyes be on the field which they reap, and go after them. Have I not commanded the young men not to touch you? And when you are thirsty, go to the vessels and drink from what the young men have drawn. So she fell on her face, bowed down to the ground, and said to him, why have I found favor in your eyes, that you should take notice of me, since I am a foreigner? And Boaz answered and said to her, it has been fully reported to me all that you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband, and how you have left your father and your mother and the land of your birth, and have come to a people whom you did not know before. Yahuwah repay your work, and a full reward be given to you by Yahuwah, Elohim of Yisrael, under whose wings you have come for refuge. Then she said, let me find favor in your sight, my Lord, for you have comforted me, and have spoken kindly to your maidservant, though I am not like one of your maidservants. Now Boaz said to her at mealtime, come here and eat of the bread, and dip your piece of bread in the vinegar. So she sat beside the reapers, and he passed parched grain to her, and she ate and was satisfied, and kept some back. So we've got this relationship developing. Obviously, she'd heard about Boaz probably before, and she'd asked, to go there, and so she was kind of working that relationship, and Boaz saw her, and also was keeping his eye on her, and it appears they're having meals together now, as he's passing her things, and she's eating, and she's holding some back. And then she rose up to glean. When she rose up to glean, Boaz commanded his young men, saying, let her glean even among the sheaves, and do not reproach her. and let grain from the bundles fall purposely for her. Leave it that she may glean, and do not rebuke her. So now he's saying basically there's no limitations to her gleaning, where she can glean, what she can glean from, and even drop extra for her so that she can glean more. So she gleaned in the field until evening, and beat out what she had gleaned, and it was about an ephah of barley. And an ephah is 10 omers, and it's interesting that she was married for 10 years in Moab, so you've got this, and 10 oftentimes is a sign for judgment. Well, then she took it up and went into the city, and her mother-in-law saw what she gleaned. So she brought out and gave to her what she had kept back after she had been satisfied. And her mother-in-law said to her, "Where have you gleaned today, and where did you work? Blessed be the one who took notice of you." Okay, so she knew this was just out of the ordinary. This was not a normal day supply of gleaning. So she told her mother-in-law with whom she'd worked, and said, "The man's name with whom I work today is Boaz." Then Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, "Blessed be he of Yahuwah, who has not forsaken his kindness to the living and the dead." And Naomi said to her, "This man is a relation of ours, one of our close relatives." Ruth the Moabitess said, "He also said to me, 'You shall stay close by my young men until they have finished all my harvest.'" And Naomi said to Ruth, and the reason he would have said that is because we're in the grain harvest season, so they would be harvesting barley, wheat, and even other crops potentially during this time of year. So we'd be looking at maybe they're shifting around from different fields and different locations. So, Boaz is saying, stick with my team. You recognize them, you get to know them, and just go wherever they're going. And Naomi said to Ruth, her daughter-in-law, "It is good, my daughter, that you go out with his young women, and that people do not meet you in any other field." So she stayed close by the young women of Boaz to glean until the end of the barley harvest and the wheat harvest, and she dwelt with her mother-in-law. So again, this takes us through the entire 50-day count of the Omer count. And of course, the overriding theme of the Omer count, when you think of 50 days, you should be thinking of the Jubilee, the 50-year count, when people would be returned to their land. So, and this is exactly what's happening in this story here, is that Naomi is returning to the land of her family and bringing the foreigner with her. And it's all, in this time period when you should be thinking about a Jubilee and the grain harvest. Then Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, "My daughter, shall I not seek security for you, that it may be well with you?" So she's trying to look out for her now. What's going to happen after I die? She says, "Now Boaz, whose young women you are with, is he not our relative? In fact, he is winnowing barley tonight at the threshing floor. Therefore, wash yourself and anoint yourself. Put on your best garment and go down to the threshing floor. But do not make yourself known to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. Then it shall be, when he lies down, that you shall notice the place where he lies, and you shall go in, uncover his feet, and lie down, and he will tell you what you should do." So here now, this is kind of giving us an idea of where we're at within that 50 days. Even though we know this whole story takes place within those harvest periods, Boaz is winnowing barley at that point. So that means the barley is all brought in, it's been gathered, it's been collected, it's been threshed, and they're at the threshing floor now, and that's when you would now winnow it. You would get a winnowing fork, you'd toss it up in the air, and the chaff would blow away, and the grain would fall to the ground. And so you just keep doing that and doing that and doing that until all you've got is grain and you've got rid of all the chaff. Well, of course, John, the immerser, said that Yeshua comes with a winnowing fork in his hand. So again, we have all these prophetic shadow pictures presented in this story. So Boaz is winnowing, and it's a time of celebration. You're working, but you're also feasting because you're looking at the great harvest that's come in. It's the end of the harvest, and it's really a time of rejoicing when Yah has blessed you, and you can actually see all the blessings there before you. So she said to her, all that you say to me, I will do. So Ruth is obedient to Naomi, and so she went down to the threshing floor and did according to all that her mother-in-law instructed her. And it's important to notice too that we don't know where this threshing floor is, but it's in Bethlehem somewhere outside, probably outside of Bethlehem, amongst the fields usually. But we know that the temple was built on a threshing floor. So that's a very important and significant place when we're talking about the appointed times of Yahweh. Just like wells are significant locations where we see many things happening, so is the threshing floor. So she went down to the threshing floor and did according to all that her mother-in-law instructed her. And after Boaz had eaten and drunk, and his heart was cheerful, he went to lie down at the end of the heap of grain, and she came softly, uncovered his feet, and lay down. Now it happened at midnight that the man was startled and turned himself, and there a woman was lying at his feet. He said, who are you? And she answered, I am Ruth, your maidservant. Take your maidservant under your wing, for you are a close relative. So, this is pretty upfront. She didn't wait to have Boaz tell her what to do as Naomi instructed. She kind of took the bull by the horns here and said, hey, take me under your wing, for I am a close relative. So she took the initiative here. Then he said, blessed are you of Yahweh, my daughter. And see, we have that. I haven't been kind of going through the Aleph Taz here, but there, we have an Aleph Ta right there between, blessed are you of Yah, my daughter. So you've got this messianic, you've got a lot of messianic symbolism here. When you come down, you see the Aleph Ta in these different locations. We can kind of see that there. So anyways, and the whole story is messianic, and we'll see the Aleph Ta located all over throughout the text. It says, for you have shown more kindness at the end than at the beginning, in that you did not go after young men, whether rich or poor. And now, my daughter, do not fear. I will do for you all that you request, for all the people of my town know that you are a virtuous woman. Now it is true that I am a close relative. However, there is a relative closer than I. Stay this night, and in the morning it shall be that if he will perform the duty of a close relative for you, good, let him do that. But if he does not want to perform the duty for you, then I will perform the duty for you as Yahweh lives. Lie down until morning. So she lay at his feet until morning, and she arose before one could recognize another. So that would be at the dawning of the day, typically is a time of day when you can't quite see an individual. You might be able to make out a figure, but you can't see, you can't identify people specifically. That's typically referred to as the dawning of the day. Then he said, do not let it be known that the woman came to the threshing floor. Also he said, bring the shawl that is on you and hold it. And when she held it, he measured out 6 ephahs of barley and laid it on her. Then she went into the city. When she came to her mother-in-law, she said, is that you, my daughter? Then she told her all that the man had done for her, and she said, these 6 ephahs of barley he gave me, for he said to me, do not go empty-handed to your mother-in-law. So that would be 60 omer of barley. Then she said, "Sit still, my daughter, until you know how the matter will turn out, for the man will not rest until he has concluded the matter this day." Now, Boaz went up to the gate and sat down there. Some translations often refer to that as the courts. I've seen certain prophets refer to the gate as the courts, certain translations, and because that's where typically the legal hearings and determinations would be made. A lot of times the king would come and sit at the gate, or if the king was in the city, or the elders of the city would gather at that gate. So Boaz is going to transact something legal here. And he went up to the gate and sat down there. And behold, the close relative of whom Boaz had spoken came by. So Boaz said, "Come aside, friend, sit down here." So he came aside and sat down. And he took 10 men from the elders of the city and said, "Sit down here." And again, the 10 is typically judgment. It's when there's going to be some judgment or determination made. So they sat down. Then he said to the close relative Naomi, who has come back from the country of Moab, "Sold the piece of land which belonged to our brother Elimelech. And I thought to inform you, saying, buy it back in the presence of the inhabitants and the elders of my people. If you will redeem it, redeem it. But if you will not redeem it, then tell me that I may know. For there is no one but you to redeem it, and I am next after you." And he said, "I will redeem it." Then and it's interesting because first he's just talking about land, and then Boaz said, "On the day that you buy the field from the hand of Naomi, you must also buy it from Ruth, the Moabitess, the wife of the dead, to perpetuate the name of the dead through his inheritance." And the close relative said, "I cannot redeem it for myself, lest I ruin my own inheritance. You redeem my right of redemption for yourself, for I cannot redeem it." So you've got the situation where, again, this harkens us to the Jubilee, because you basically would never lose, a family line would not lose their land. They could sell it or mortgage it for a period of time, but they would never lose it permanently, because the pricing would basically be scheduled according to the Jubilee. So at the end of the Jubilee, you had a right to come back to your land. So again, this is all kind of pointing to a Jubilee here. All right. Yeah, and of course we see the Aleph Tah here associated with the Redeemer and the right of redemption, because that's what Yeshua did. I mean, he redeemed us, and Yeshua is ultimately, as we're going to see, is the end result of this entire story. Now, this was the custom in former times in Israel concerning redeeming and exchanging. To confirm anything, one man took off his sandal and gave it to the other, and this was a confirmation in Israel. Therefore, the close relative said to Boaz, "Buy it for yourself." So he took off his sandal, and Boaz said to the elders and all the people, "You are witnesses this day that I have bought all that was Elimelech's and all that was Chilion's and Mahlon's from the hand of Naomi. Moreover, Ruth the Moabitess, the widow of Mahlon, I have acquired as my wife." And so you've got the root there, Cana, which is very interesting. In fact, my recent newsletter from today, that'll probably be an audio version by tomorrow, but it's the April 26, 2025 newsletter. I've talked about it other places, but basically, Cana acquiring a wife is very important. And Yeshua going with 5 of his disciples to Cana, to a wedding, was showing his purpose, that he was going to acquire his bride, and that was setting the stage for his entire ministry. So here again we have Boaz saying, "I've acquired Ruth as my wife to perpetuate the name of the dead through his inheritance." that the name of the dead may not be cut off from among his brethren and from his position at the gate. You are witnesses this day. So essentially, this is really for the sake of Elimelech, because his sons died, he had no heirs. So this is going to perpetuate the name of Elimelech through this land and through this marriage. And all the people who were at the gate and the elders said, we are witnesses. Yahuwah, make the woman who is coming to your house like Rachel and Leah, the two who built the house of Israel, and may you prosper in Ephrathah and be famous in Bethlehem. May your house be like the house of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah, because of the offspring which Yahuwah will give you from this young woman. Now it's interesting that they kind of compare Ruth, who's a Moabitess, to Rachel and Leah. And remember, both Rachel and Leah came from across the Euphrates. They were still in the land of Babylon when they were brought in to be wives. Okay, so they were essentially foreigners. And then we have Tamar was a Canaanite, and she was a foreigner who was significant in the line of the Messiah, David. And so it's interesting that here they even compare Ruth to these other women. And all of these significant women that we use as examples here are essentially foreigners that were brought in to the covenant. So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. And when he went into her, Yahuwah gave her conception, and she bore a son. Then the women said to Naomi, blessed be Yahuwah, who has not left you this day without a close relative, and may his name be famous in Israel. So, in other words, she came back and there was actually a redeemer. And of course, the whole focus of the story is about the importance of having a redeemer. There are so many people in Judaism that they don't have, they're looking for a Messiah, but they don't have a redeemer available, and yet Christians recognize that Yeshua is the Messiah, and they have to understand that he came as a redeemer and why he came. And again, I set forth that he made it very clear that he came to acquire a bride, and he made it clear from the very beginning. So, but the key is that we can't wander off into Moab, and we can't wander away from him. We need to cling to him like Ruth clung to Naomi as Naomi was returning. And again, the word for returning is teshuvah, to kind of, and it has the same meaning as repentance. So as Naomi essentially repented and returned when she saw how cursed she was in Moab, that's very similar to all of us that are scattered in the nations. We need to repent and return to, forsake the enemy or the gods of the foreign lands that we've been in and the religions that we've been involved in, and turn to the Elohim of Israel. May he be to you a restorer of life and a nourisher of your old age, for your daughter-in-law who loves you, who is better to you than 7 sons, has borne him. Then Naomi took the child and laid him on her bosom and became and nursed him. So essentially she's kind of raising this child almost as if it's her own, because she didn't have any offspring anymore. Also, the neighbor women gave him a name, saying, there is a son born to Naomi, and they called his name Obed, and he is the father of Jesse, the father of David. It's interesting that the women named the child, and they most likely named him when he was circumcised. Now this is the genealogy of Perez. Perez begot Hezron. Hezron begot Ram, and Ram begot Aminadab. Aminadab begot Nahshon, and Nahshon begot Salmon, and Salmon begot Boaz, and Boaz begot Obed, and Obed begot Jesse, and Jesse begot David. So the point of this is leading up to King David, the Messianic king of Israel, and it's all prophetic in nature, because now we know that Yeshua is the offspring of David through both Mary and Joseph in the physical realm, and that he is the son of Elohim, who is promised redeemer for those who turn and cling to the Elohim of Israel. So what a significant story occurring, amidst the grain harvest, this time that we're in, as we're counting the Omer. So I encourage you to continue to contemplate all the wonderful messages that are found in that story, and the focus on Yeshua the Messiah as our Redeemer. So that's just my little commentary on the Book of Ruth, and I hope you enjoyed it. And if you're interested in the teachings that we send out, if you're not subscribed to the newsletter, then I would recommend that you go to our website, www.shemayisrael.net. It's YISRAEL.net, and sign up for our newsletter so that you can get the teachings that we send out free of charge every week. All right, so that's Todd Bennett from shemayisrael.net. Shalom, and may you continue counting on the way to Shavuot.